Good afternoon, class. My name is Ms. Gonzalez, and along with my co-teacher, Mr. Nieto, we will be teaching you the fundamentals of composition of functions. Now, that may sound a bit scary, but not to worry, there's nothing to be afraid of. With the definition, a short stop-motion animation video to help you visualize it, and an interactive worksheet will help you master this concept in no time. Our goal is to make sure you understand and overall have fun. So, here we go. So let's talk about the definition of the composition of functions. Now, it would seem easier to just Google it, but let's be honest. That definition will most likely be flat, monotone, and boring. So I'm going to change the rhythm and come up with my interpretation of the composition of functions. To start off, you're going to need two equations, f of x and g of x. The composition happens when you substitute g of x into f of x to form f compose g of x, or vice versa, you substitute f of x into g of x and it forms g compose f of x. So that was the definition of the composition of functions. Now we're going to show you a short stop motion animation video that will help illustrate this concept a bit further. As you can recall, there's a function being substituted in. That function is going to act as our little fish, and the other function is going to act as our bigger fish. So essentially you're going to see the big fish eating the little fish. And hopefully this will help you visualize the composition of functions. Enjoy! Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed that short piece of animation and that it helped you visualize the composition of functions a lot better. Now, I will introduce Mr. Nieto, who will help you complete the worksheet in front of you.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez. So now in this part of the video, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to take out your worksheet out because we're going to go over some problems. We're going to start with problem number 1. So problem number 1 says f of x is x over x plus 1, g of x equals x cubed. So for part A, they're asking us to do f plus g of x. Another way of writing this is exactly like this. F of x plus g of x. What this means is exactly how it sounds. It's f of x plus g of x. So that's what all I'm going to do. X over x plus 1, which again is f of x plus g of x, which is x cubed. You will check if something is there to simplify. In this case, we're just going to go ahead and leave it like this. And that's going to turn out to be your answer. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and move on to letter B. Letter B is exactly the same as letter A, except that it's now f minus g of x. Another way of rewriting this, which I recommend you to always rewrite it because it seems to make more sense once you rewrite it like this, is f of x minus g of x. It's exactly how it looks. It's going to be x over x plus 1. Again, this part is f of x. Now, minus, I'm going to go ahead and put this parentheses in, not because it's from g of x, but just to make it clear that it's minus g of x, the whole thing, minus x cubed. And go ahead and close that parentheses. Again, you would check if there's something to simplify, but in this case, we're just going to go ahead and leave it like that. That's going to be our answer for part B. Now, moving on to part C. Part C says f times g of x. This all it means, again, let's rewrite it. When we rewrite it, it makes much sense. Not only to visually, but just generally, it makes more sense. So it's just basically like this, f of x times g of x. So this times that, this times that. So it's going to be f of x, which is x over x plus 1, times x cubed, which is g of x. I will multiply the top, this is over 1, so multiply the top, x times x. They're the same base, so you add the exponents together, which gives you x to the 4th over x plus 1 times 1, which is just going to be x plus 1. And that right there is your answer. Simplify already. Okay, now to part D. Part D says f over g of x. Again, my recommendation would be to put f of x divided by g of x. In other words, let's rewrite it. F of x divided by g of x. I keep saying the same thing of rewriting it, but because of the following reason. Once you have it in this form, it's super easy just to substitute it into the form. So now it's gonna be x over x plus 1 divided by x cubed. This is basically what it's saying, but I don't like it this form. The way I'm gonna write it is gonna be the following. X over x plus 1 divided by x cubed. It's exactly the same form as I used to have it before. The only difference now is I can put this one over 1 because there's an invisible one right here, and I make it both fractions. So I'm dividing a fraction divided by another fraction. How do I divide fractions? Well, if you recall, I just have to multiply times the reciprocal. So I flip the second one, the reciprocal, and I just multiply across. X times 1, x plus 1 times x cubed gives me x cubed times x plus 1. We can cancel one of the x's to get 1 over x squared x plus 1. Your final answer. Okay, for part E, this is where a composition of functions are going to start. So like Ms. Gonzalez was saying before, the small fish is going to get eaten by the bigger fish. And right here it's kind of hard to see which one is the big fish and which one is the small fish. But again, I'm going to tell you the same tip I told you before. Let's rewrite this. So it's going to be f of g of x. Now, what this means is this function, this part right here, is going to be inside of f. It's going to go right inside of f. So now it's clear to see this function right here is the small fish getting eaten by this function right here, the bigger fish. So all we have to do now is replace this. So we're going to have f, this function right here, get replaced by g. So every time I see an x into f, I'm going to put g. That sounded a little bit complicated, but just pay attention on this part, just to make sure you're okay with this part. So it's going to be, instead of saying x, I'm going to say g of x, which g of x is x cubed. So I'm going to say x cubed over x again, which is going to be g of x, which is this part right here, x cubed plus 1. And that right there will be your answer. Okay, and the last part of this problem is going to be part f. So it's g of f of x. Again, it's composition functions. It's the smaller fish going into the bigger fish. My tip again would be to rewrite this. So it's going to be g of f of x. If you look closely, it's exactly the same but opposite of the last part. Now f is going to be inside of g. Now f is acting as the small fish and g is acting as the big fish. So basically what I'm going to do here is every time I see an x in g, I'm going to replace f of x. So let's see it again. So g, which is something, which is x cubed, so it's going to be f of x cubed. So this whole part goes inside of g of x, and we cube it. And this would be your answer. Okay guys, this is all we have for you guys on this video on composition of functions. Now, it's your turn to get your hands dirty with it.